I think to throw Mamdani in with JD Vance is a huge reach. Mamdani has been the opposite of morally clear on.
Are you joking, JD Vance?
Let me ask you this, because I think this is
very much not joking.
This is actually to Adam's point. If you are willing to condemn, if you're willing to condemn Mamdani for what you just described, again, why would you not condemn conservatives for doing effectively the same thing when you have people like, Nick Fuentes who
are you
out
questioning
there?
me about what I've had to say about
I'm questioning
anti-Semitism
you. No.
and who should be?
You need clarity about people like Paul and
I'm questioning
Gracia.
you about whether you're willing to apply the same principle to Mamdani that you would apply to people in your own party.
In today's video, Adam Mockler unleashes on Scott Jennings in a heated debate on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. What starts as a discussion about leadership and accountability turns into a sharp fact check on how selectively outrage is applied when it comes to bigotry, anti-Semitism, racism, and Islamophobia in MAGA politics. Adam doesn't let vague talking points slide, pushing back with receipts and forcing a real reckoning over why certain voices stay silent until hate is directed at them personally. So let's dive in and watch how Adam Mockler silences Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
The FBI back in July released this memo that I was reading where they made a few claims that were just blown out by the Trump administration. First of all, they said that or blown out by the DOJ. They said that releasing any more files would require releasing child pornography. Then they said there was no evidence linking anyone else to the scheme other than Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. After Congress forced the release of tens of thousands of files, we now know the FBI was lying. Pam Bondi also lied on Fox News. She said she had the files on her desk. She was going to release them. So the entire priority of this administration has been off. The DOJ had a few goals. They said they have to release all of the files with reasonable redactions. They did neither of those things. They didn't release all of the files. They're drip feeding them, and the redactions weren't reasonable. It was over-redacted in some parts, and as we just saw, under-redacted in other parts, and victims were exposed.
And they had plenty of time to do this right.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the concerns and the complaints of the victims, is that they never heard from DOJ about how to do this in a way that centered their needs for justice in all of this, which is purportedly what DOJ says that they were trying to protect. But it seems like Trump is also concerned about protecting, other people who were palling around with Jeffrey Epstein.
I don't like the pictures of Bill Clinton being shown. I don't like the pictures of other people being shown. I think it's a terrible thing. I think Bill Clinton's a big boy. He can handle it. But you probably have pictures being exposed of other people that innocently met Jeffrey Epstein years ago, many years ago.
And so, to Nina's point, he's not wrong that there are some people who are photographed there. Maybe they went to a concert, an event, weren't involved in the larger scheme. But Bill Clinton has been targeted by Trump officials in the last few days. And his spokesperson said, we're not afraid of this being released. Please release it all. It seems that the only person who really doesn't want more released is President Trump.
Well, President Trump came out a few weeks back and was actually in support of releasing the files and having everything be out there. I think that what the president's point here is a presumption of innocence until guilt, right? To not jump to any conclusions. But I would say we got to extract the politics out of this whole thing, and it's everyone at the table agrees on. The main point of this is getting justice for the victims and ensuring that we do it correctly. And Abby, I agree with your point. And I agree with your point that we've got to protect the victims, keep their names redacted. And even if that does mean over-redacting until we are sure, what we have and what we're releasing is there. But I'm not going to go down the road of injecting politics into something that shouldn't be political at all. It's about getting justice and closure for these victims, but also doing so out of respect for the courts, like you said earlier, and having that operating with that presumption of innocence until we have some evidence that someone is guilty through the process of the courts.
It's uniquely important to Donald Trump now that there's a presumption of innocence, but he's willing to proactively say that people like Schiff, people like Letitia James are guilty. Now it's very, very important that we're super careful about what photos we're releasing. I just find it really convenient that Donald Trump is now so worried about this.
Well, I go back to the point I made earlier, is that, you just tried to re-inject politics in this. You have to separate these two things. There are peoples whose lives
I'll do
are
it when Trump
impacted
does.
here.
I'll start to separate it when Trump
be the
separates
leader
it.
and show them the way.
I'm a 23-year-old. He's the president.
This is the.
You're telling Adam
That's
to
Adam's
do that.
go-to.
Wait,
I believe
Your guys'
Adam.
go-to is
it
blaming
different.
me more than
Adam.
You make it
I believe
different.
Adam.
You're an opinion
Adam
leader.
can be a trendsetter.
He's not wrong. I mean,
Let's start with the big picture. The Epstein case has never been a normal criminal case. It's a sprawling network crime involving trafficking, powerful people, international money, and decades of documented abuse. That means the files aren't just some harmless stack of paperwork. They include victim statements, investigative leads, travel manifests, contact lists, evidence logs, sealed court filings, and internal memos about what prosecutors did and didn't pursue. This is the kind of case where what's missing can be as important as what's released, because missing files can point to who got protected, who got quietly removed, and what agencies chose not to chase. And that's why people don't buy the "we're protecting victims" line when it's coming from officials who clearly weren't centering victims from the start. If you're truly protecting victims, you don't leak partial information in a chaotic drip feed that lets random names float out into the internet ecosystem where conspiracy people can dox anyone they want. In real victim-centered releases, the government coordinates with survivors and advocacy groups, sets standards for redaction, and makes sure the release doesn't accidentally reveal someone's identity through context clues. It's not just about blacking out a name, it's about protecting details like locations, dates, family ties, initials, and even descriptions that can identify a person in the real world. And here's the kicker: over-redaction is sometimes necessary in the short term, but incompetence is not. If they're over-redacting in one place and under-redacting in another, that doesn't look like careful protection. That looks like a sloppy process where the priority is PR management, not justice.
should there be boundaries? Should someone be able to go up on that stage and say, if you believe these things, you are not part of our movement?
Well, look, my personal view is that this was an event, it's the first big rally since Charlie got murdered. And specifically what Candace has been doing, terrorizing a grieving widow for the last several months with conspiracy theories, some of them wrapped up in this whole Israel nonsense, is nothing short of despicable. And I think Ben was right to call that out. I didn't hear Ben calling for the excommunication or the deplatforming of anyone, but I do think it's more than reasonable to say, what kind of a movement allows someone in whose job is to monetize the grief of a widow after she had to witness her husband and the leader of this organization get murdered? I think that's more than in bounds for him to talk about, look, we're a political party and a political movement. We're not a sponge. You don't have to absorb everything that oozes in under the door. I think that was Ben's point. And look, everybody's going to have a right to say whatever they want. It's not about free speech. It's about what sort of speech you want to be identified with. I, for one, don't really want to be identified with someone who is terrorizing a grieving widow.
Yeah, and we'll get to how Vance plays into this, because you mentioned it, but the New York Times wrote this, in the depths of these Republican divisions has been obscured by two things: shared affection for Trump and a shared revulsion at the left. But Trump is no longer on the ballot, and there's increased alarm over the new right. These two factors are working together to shrink the Republican tent.
Yeah, you said JD Vance, his opinion is important. He has had no moral clarity about any of this division whatsoever. He refused to condemn the young Republican group chat when it came out a few months ago. They were talking about gas chambers. He's refused to condemn Paul and Gracia. He's refused to directly combat the Groyper movement growing. I just think it's, my entire life, Republicans have been targeting minority group after minority group. Conservatives have been getting rich and gaining power off of this, targeting immigrants, targeting LGBTQ people, women, it's been Somalis, Haitians, but the second that certain MAGA commentators are now the subject of this exact type of bigotry, they have a stunning amount of moral clarity about it. Vivek Ramaswamy only had moral clarity when anti-Indian American hatred was being spread. Republican Representative Randy Fine has a lot of moral clarity about bigotry when it's against him, but the way that he talks about Zohran Mamdani, the way he talks about Ilhan Omar is incredibly contradictory. You can't just stop bigotry from entering your movement when it's hitting you. You have to stop it at the door. This is not courageous for people to speak out. It is self-preservation at this point.
You brought up Mamdani. Do you believe that Mamdani has shown any moral clarity when it comes to Israel and the attacks
The
on
day
Jews.
after he was elected, there was a swastika. Let me finish. There was a swastika drawn on a window, and he immediately tweeted out and condemned it. There is no equivocation between the way. There is no equivalent between the way Zoran and JD Vance have conducted themselves.
So
Do you
today-
think JD Vance should condemn Nick Fuentes? Should JD
today-
Vance condemn the Groypers?
He has. He told him he could eat SHIT. That's
Not
number
on
one.
stage. He didn't do it on
Number
stage
two-
in front of the
number two,
Groypers.
Today, Mamdani got asked, there are people on your transition team who have said it's okay to kill Jews after October the 7th. And he said, well, we have a diversity of political opinion. I think to throw Mamdani in with JD Vance is a huge reach. Mamdani has been the opposite of morally clear on
Are you joking, JD Vance?
Honestly, this debate is a perfect example of why people don't trust the Republican Party when they suddenly pretend to care about bigotry. Because the truth is, a lot of this stuff didn't start yesterday. The only thing that changed is who it's aimed at now. For years, the MAGA ecosystem has rewarded the most extreme voices. The algorithm doesn't boost calm, responsible takes. It boosts outrage, conspiracy, and dehumanization. And when you build a movement where influencers get rich by blaming the other side or scapegoating entire groups, you can't act shocked when that same culture turns inward and starts eating its own. That's why Adam's point hits. If you only condemn hate once it targets you personally, that's not moral clarity. That's self-preservation. It's easy for Republicans to suddenly find their backbone when the hate is aimed at their own candidates, their own communities, or their own public figures. But where was that energy when it was immigrants being smeared, or LGBTQ people being treated like predators, or Muslims being painted as threats, or black politicians getting attacked with racist dog whistles? And JD Vance is the perfect example of the problem when leaders refuse to clearly draw a line, when they dodge, when they both sides it. That creates space for the worst people to thrive. Extremism doesn't need a formal endorsement. It just needs permission, and silence is permission.
Yes,
this because
very,
I think
very,
this is
I'm very
actually
much not joking.
this is actually to Adam's point. If you are willing to condemn, if you're willing to condemn Mamdani for what you just described, again, why would you not condemn conservatives for doing effectively the same thing when you have people like Nick Fuentes who
Are you
out
questioning
there?
me about what I've had to say about
I'm questioning
anti-Semitism
you. No.
and who should be?
You need clarity about people like
I'm
Paul and
questioning
Gracia.
you about whether you're willing to apply the same principle to Mamdani that you would apply to people in your own party. Are you willing to do that?
I have repeatedly on this show said anti-Semitism has no place in our political discourse, and we don't need to be associated with it.
So for the people
Are you just
like
now
JD
remembering this?
Vance who say, oh, well, we have a lot of different viewpoints in the Republican tent, and who am I to say who is in and who is not? He just mentioned the Republican group chat, and that was effectively JD Vance's point, which is that these are just boys. Boys will be boys.
Yeah.
They're just young men. We're not going to denounce them. We're not going to denounce them over little mistakes. Are you okay with that?
JD Vance is going to have ample opportunity to lead this
No,
coalition.
but I'm asking about you.
Wait, do you think JD Vance should condemn
I'm
it?
asking about you. Are you okay with that?
Everybody-
Just in the same
well,
way that
continue
you
the
are
meetings
not
and then I'll
okay
answer.
with Mamdani. That's what I'm at. I get that JD Vance is JD Vance, but I'm wondering about you. What's the principle that you apply to JD Vance? And is it the same as what you're applying to Mamdani?
Well, I don't put them anywhere near in the same universe, A. B, look, it is up to us as conservatives to decide who we want to be associated with. I can assure you, we do not want to be associated in any way, shape, or form with Nick Fuentes or anybody approximating what he has to say. Period. Full stop. It will destroy us if we do it.
I wish JD Vance would say the same thing.
Tim.
I was going to say, I completely agree. There's been several leaders in the conservative movement who've pushed back on all these talking points about anti-Semitism, and I will completely agree with Scott. There is no place in the conservative movement or in the Republican Party, for that matter, for anti-Semitism or any of those things. I do find it ironic, though, that you compare the vice president, who has, in fact, your litmus test was that he went on Twitter and you just said the vice president didn't condemn something from the stage. The vice president condemned the group chat. We've talked about this on this show, and you guys are completely.
He called
this.
He called.
Wait a second. You said, let me finish earlier. Let me finish.
Okay.
You said that
Tim,
the
we've
vice
talked about
president.
this on this
we
show,
did,
and you
and
did
you
not
guys are
condemn the group
mischaracterizing
chat.
the statements that the vice president made. He absolutely came out and condemned and said that there is no place for any comments like that in the Republican Party.
JD Vance said he's going to
movement.
warn his kids so some quote-unquote scumbag doesn't leak a group chat in a similar way. He was implying the person who leaked the group chat was a scumbag. JD Vance has had the farthest thing from moral clarity this entire time.
What really jumps out in this debate is how easy it is for Republicans to say, yeah, anti-Semitism is bad in the abstract, but how hard it suddenly becomes when the anti-Semitism is coming from people who are actually inside their political ecosystem and helping them win clicks, donations, and elections. Because here's the part that gets ignored. The Nick Fuentes problem didn't appear out of nowhere. Fuentes has been around for years. He's had access to political events. His ideas circulate in the exact same online pipelines that feed MAGA media every day. And when leaders don't draw bright lines early, the movement ends up normalizing the presence of extremists until it becomes inconvenient to acknowledge. That's why Abby's push matters. It's not enough to say, we don't like anti-Semitism. The question is whether you're willing to treat it like a disqualifier, the same way people on the right demand disqualifications from Democrats over far less. If your standard is only enforced when it's politically safe, it's not a standard. It's branding, and the boys will be boys framing is honestly one of the biggest giveaways, because political group chats aren't harmless when they're normalizing violence, talking about gas chambers, or treating genocide like edgy humor. That's not just immature, it's radicalization training. We've seen this pattern repeatedly. It's just jokes until someone takes it seriously, and then everyone pretends they're shocked. Also, it's worth remembering that anti-Semitic violence in the US has been rising for years. The FBI has consistently reported that Jews are the most targeted religious group in hate crimes despite being a small percentage of the population. So when party leaders get vague or defensive about condemning extremist content, that's not just political, it has real-world consequences. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.